Good evening, everyone. This is a regular board meeting of the Cuyahoga Heights Local Schools. Today is February 12th, 2020, and it is 7 p.m. Would Mr. Muccio call the roll, please?
Mrs. Etter.
Here.
Mrs. Schuker.
Here.
Mr. Suchaki.
Here.
Mr. Naaman.
Here.
Mr. Dobbins.
Here. 5 present, none absent. On behalf of the board, I'd like to welcome all students, staff, parents, and interested community members to tonight's Board of Education meeting. The board values and encourages public comment on education issues. Anyone having an interest in the actions of the board may participate during the public comments portion of the meeting. Please identify yourself on the sign-in sheet, which is back on that orange counter. A copy of the board meeting agenda is available to review on our school district's website. Please silence your cell phones during this meeting. Thank you. And we'll now have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second. Moved by Mr. Naaman, second by Mr. Suchaki. Is there any discussion?
Just one addition, that we will go into executive session for G1, employment and compensation. No action will be taken afterwards.
Okay, very good. So may I have, do we need to have another motion, or can we approve the amended motion? Okay. So no further discussion. May we have a vote on that motion, please?
Mr. Naaman.
Aye.
Mr. Suchaki.
Aye.
Mrs. Etter.
Aye.
Mrs. Schuker.
Aye.
Mr. Dobbins.
Aye. The motion passes 5-0. Comments from the public? I don't know that we have any. Is there anyone from the public here to speak tonight? No. Okay. Well, with that, then, we're going to have several presentations this evening, and I'm going to turn the program over to Mr. Evans.
First presentation is Dr. Rudy Breglia from the School Bus Safety Alliance to talk to us about safety belts in school buses. So it's all yours, Rudy.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. My name is Rudy Breglia. I'm a citizen advocate for seatbelts in school buses. And I'm here tonight to give you just a taste of the issue. I have no commercial interest. I know we're all on the same page, that we want the safest form of transportation for our children. And I think we all realize that you're much better off if you have a seatbelt on if you're in a crash. Now, when I'm talking about seat belts, I'm talking about the lap shoulder belts, the same ones that you have in every passenger car. I know it's a complex issue with a lot of moving parts, but I can assure you what I'm trying to do is help school districts handle the problem, handle the issue, and overcome any perceived difficulties that might be found. To help the district, if you look at the last page of your handout, I have a listing of experienced people who dealt with putting seatbelts in school buses at a state level and a school district level. And all these people are willing to help. All you have to do is give them a call and they'll tell you about their experience. On the first page of the handout, I have the conclusions that I've reached in the 3+ years that I've been working on the issue. Now, the ultimate conclusion is that seatbelts save lives and reduce injuries. That slogan was derived by a federal agency that's responsible for school bus safety, and it's called NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. They're the people that make you wear seatbelts in your cars. In 2015, they changed their policy and came up with this statement. And they've started to recommend seatbelts in all school buses. Since 1968, seatbelts have been in all passenger cars and literally have saved hundreds of thousands of lives. Since 1986, Ohio school bus drivers have had to have seatbelts. And if you noticed in that crash that took place a couple of days ago in Perry, county, the only one who was not tossed around in the bus was the school bus driver, and that's because he had his seatbelt on. And then he popped up and started to give instructions to the students, and that it really showed that he was aware and alert and wasn't injured at all. He was shaken up. The most important statement I'm going to make tonight is that number one conclusion, which is current Ohio school bus safety features are inadequate to protect children fully. And I can say that because 6 to 7 children are killed and more than 5,000 are injured every year in school bus accidents. In the 1970s, federal agencies made a compromise, and they selected a padded seat backs over seat belts. And they based this upon a flawed and incomplete theory called compartmentalization. This theory is crude and violent means of protection. It's meant to minimize injuries, but not to prevent them. The basis for the theory is that the seat back is meant to absorb the impact energy of airborne children's bodies that are set in motion by sudden stops or crashes. Now, the theory is most effective when the bus is going slow, when it's going forward, and all the children are seated properly. And by properly, I mean sitting upright, facing forward with both feet on the ground. Now, we know kids can't maintain that position for any period of time. And if any of those conditions are not met, the theory starts to fail. And it fails completely when you have rollovers or side crashes. And you saw that with the videotape that was put on TV all over the place, I guess yesterday. So the theory fails completely, and kids have absolutely no protection. You saw those kids hit the roof of the bus and then fall over. That's exactly what happens in a rollover. North Carolina did a 10-year study where they found that 1/3 of all the crashes that they experienced of school buses were of the rollover or the side crash type. And not unexpectedly, those crashes accounted for 80% of the children's injuries. So it's no surprise what happened in Perry County. Well, I'm going to drop down and talk about some of the conclusions. If you drop down to number 5, seat belts do two things. I'm talking about lap shoulder belts. They enhance safety and they improve behavior. And behavior is connected to safety as well. If the school bus driver is distracted by the chaos that's going on behind him or her, they're going to have more crashes. The other thing that the improved behavior does is it practically eliminates bullying. And because the chaos on the bus is, and how many people have ridden school buses in their careers? Okay.
In my life.
Well, sometimes there's chaos going on in the back of the bus, and if you have to face that every day, and I know there's a shortage of drivers now. One of the things that happens is the drivers don't stick with the job. They'll go off to a less chaotic job. So if you install seat belts, you have better driver retention. If you look at number 6, NHTSA, that federal agency I mentioned to you before, requires seat belts in cars, in small school buses, and in commercial motor coaches. Our own Sherrod Brown sponsored the bill that put seat belts in commercial motor coaches. And Sherrod Brown also wrote a letter to the school board of Avon Lake and encouraged them to complete the trial that they were planning. And that trial is taking place right now in Avon Lake. And Beechwood is even more committed than Avon Lake. The city council raised $250,000 and gave it to the school district so that they could buy seatbelts in every new bus that they buy. Wouldn't that be nice if your city council gave you $250,000 to do that? So those are the two cities and the only cities in Ohio that have seatbelts in their school buses for all passengers. If you look at number 7, two federal agencies involved in school bus safety, NHTSA and NTSB. You see the NTSB people around airline crashes, but they're also responsible for investigating school bus crashes. And they'll be investigating that one in the accident that occurred yesterday. There are many safety medical organizations that recommend seatbelts in school buses, National Safety Council, AMA, and there are grants from North Carolina and from Tennessee. Tennessee is where the Chattanooga crash occurred, and that's why they're involved. If we drop down to number 8, there's 7 states that require seatbelts in school buses. There's 2 more that require seatbelts, but there's a funding condition, and then there's 2 that have grant programs. So that's 22% of the states in the United States either require or strongly recommend seatbelts in school buses. Several cities, Philadelphia, Denver, Dallas, Indianapolis, Fort Wayne, Atlanta, all require seatbelts. And the trend is to put the seatbelts in new buses. And then gradually the fleet will turn over and you'll have eventually seatbelts in all the buses. And that's both on a state level and a school district level. Number 9, Ohio school districts risk unlimited compensatory damage awards for each student injury. We have kids riding on the highway 70 miles an hour without seatbelts. And that represents a high hazard situation. And if you do a risk assessment, you have a high hazard situation, but thank God, a very low frequency of accidents. What you wind up with is rare catastrophic events, which is like you saw in Perry County, or Chattanooga, even worse. And there is evidence, and you have this in your handout, that seatbelts in school buses are becoming a standard of care. Anybody an attorney here?
I got a room full of attorneys tonight.
Okay. Well, I won't go any further.
Wrong question.
Okay. It's the seatbelts at 70 miles an hour. It's a disaster waiting to happen. 10, additional cost. Well, it adds about 8 to 10% onto the price of a bus. You pay $90,000 for a bus. It's probably going to cost you $8,000 and change to add the seatbelts. And I'd like to make this proposal while we're here, is that if you decide to volunteer, and I've offered this to other school districts, to go ahead and do a trial with seatbelts in at least one school bus, the next day I will start working on getting you the extra funds you would need to do that trial. The additional cost of 8 to 10% winds up being about 3 cents a student a day, or about $5 a student a year. But there is cost savings. Your insurance rates would probably drop. You'd have less staff time dealing with incidents that occur on the bus, and I think you'd have less driver turnover. Now, why, number 11, why do some school districts delay? Well, cost is the overriding reason that I've been told by different school districts. there's misinformation. People say, well, the kids will, they won't use the seat belts. Well, the things I've been telling school districts is you have a strong school policy. If the seat belts are there, you have to wear them. And wearing the seatbelt puts you in the right position as far as compartmentalization is concerned. It forces you to sit upright and face forward and not run around and not drape your body over the seat in front of you. The 80 to 90% of the people who you see riding around on the highway out here or on the streets wear their seatbelts. And our kids have this safety habit, and I think we do too. You get in the car, you buckle up. My grandchildren won't let me drive the car unless everybody's buckled up. We all yell clear when that happens. But it's a new piece of equipment. The kids aren't used to it, and it does take some adjustment. They would certainly prefer to be footloose and fancy-free and be able to run around inside the bus. But they do have that safety habit, and if you get them, from riding in their parents' car. There is resistance to the issue. I've named the organizations. I've spoke to each of these personally, and they have different reasons for doing it. I don't know whether those are just smoke or whether they're real. I know the first one, National Association of Pupil Transportation, they want a federal requirement, and they're not going to tell their members to support seatbelts until there's a federal requirement. Well, in this atmosphere, I don't know when that's going to happen. Not anytime soon. One thing I would like to tell you about is I've been talking to a state senator from my area, and we're going to have a special interest meeting with experts in Columbus to explore this idea of having a pool of state money such that 10 school districts would be able to conduct trials of seatbelts in one bus. When that's going to occur, I don't know. Will it occur? I don't know. But at least we'll make an attempt to come together and see where it goes from there. My program goals to alert the community to the school bus safety concern, to help school districts deal with the issue, overcome perceived problems, and gather funds for volunteer school districts to conduct trials. Now, I don't want to wear out my welcome. I'll summarize. The addition of seatbelts to school buses is a substantial, critical, and recognized improvement to school bus safety and really should be a priority for all of us. I'd look at seatbelts the same way you look at a fire extinguisher. It's an absolutely needed precaution to avoid catastrophic loss like you had in Chattanooga. I usually conduct a little bit of a survey. How many people think it's a good idea to have fire extinguishers in your home? Yeah? How many people would let their child go in a car without having a seatbelt on? No. That's usually the reaction I get. I've made my point. Do you have any questions? I know I've probably taken more time than I deserve. Yes,
I have a couple. Having 3 kiddos in the district currently,
Okay.
I won't say that they always wear their seatbelt because it's resistance is its finest, moment with kids.
Yes.
My question is, during these trials, what are they looking at? Are they looking at like data that shows less bullying, which I don't believe in that, but I don't believe that seatbelts will make a difference in bullying, just personally. But that's all right.
Okay.
That's neither here nor there.
All right.
But the bus chaos, are they looking for data on how many bus incidents? What's exactly the trial going to be?
Well, in the handout or not in your handout, but in what you got in the email, I have a description of the proposal.
Okay.
But essentially what it says is, you're certainly looking at safety parameters, how many children are injured, but because it's so rare, you
Right.
probably won't have if you have 2 or 3 in a year throughout your whole bus system, it'll be a lot, okay? But primarily what they're going to be looking at is behavior and the number of reports that kids have written up on. There's one school district, the Bartholomew School District in Indiana. I've talked to the folks that ran that, and they said that the reports dropped from 90 to 95% of the school bus drivers. The driver has, a list of infractions and and then if you violate one of those infractions and you're written up, well, the write-ups are what drop dramatically because the kids they're settled. They can't get up and move around. They can't bother their neighbor that's maybe a couple of seats up. So I've seen videos, same kids, same route, before the seatbelts and after, and it's like night and day. It looks like it's staged, and I know it wasn't. The kids on one side are going over the seat and they're hitting their friend, and the kids on the other side with the seatbelt just sitting there quiet. You had a question?
I do.
Oh, was that okay?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out why this hasn't happened already. Like, it seems like this has been talked about like forever.
1970s.
So that's a pretty long time.
Yeah.
Not forever, but it's a long time. So why hasn't this happened already? Is it because there's not a federal requirement, or is it cost? What's the reason why this hasn't happened already?
I think the driving force is cost. In the 70s, they came up with this theory of compartmentalization, and the government and the school districts gambled that there wouldn't be a lot of accidents. And they're right, when you consider, 25 million kids a day are in those 500,000 school buses. Well, and I'm not going to use that word only, because, I just think of those poor kids in Chattanooga dying unnecessarily, with something as simple as a seatbelt would have saved some of them. But they look at the risk, and they're willing to risk the rare catastrophic event.
Well,
But it's mainly cost.
You're saying $8,000 basically per bus, right?
Right.
That doesn't seem like a lot to me. And then you also said that you would work with the district for extra funds to
Yes.
fund something like this. So where do those funds come from?
Well, here would be the businesses that you have operating within your limits. I'd be talking to the social action groups. Well, that's one of the groups I've been talking to. School districts, city councils, and social action groups like Rotary Club, Kiwanis, Lions Club, and with the idea that I knew that sooner or later someone's going to have to pay. And if I can make that easier, then maybe more school districts would go ahead and do the trial. So I haven't gone to your Rotary Club in
Right.
Cuyahoga,
So you're
Iowa, but I'm willing to.
So you're really looking for community philanthropic
Right.
to cover something like this.
Right. I'm also working from a political standpoint. I'm working at a state level. I've dealt with our state senator, and I've dealt with other senators and representatives on a state level. And no one told me that, Rudy, that's a bad idea. So I'm going to keep pursuing that, but I'm trying multiple parallel paths, and I'm hoping that one of them will turn out. I think that we've reached a turning point in Ohio. We have 2 school districts, okay? Now, I've gone to 34 school districts, and some of them have been very cooperative and very interested in what I'm saying. About a third of them invite me back, and I talk to the superintendent for an hour. In Wadsworth, I talked to the superintendent, director of transportation, for a full hour, okay? The superintendent didn't smile at all until the very end. And I didn't know whether he didn't like me or he thought that this is a serious step to take. And so, I have a feeling that maybe one or two districts will bite the bullet and go ahead and do a trial. Whether they ask me to help develop funds or not, I don't know. But I'm willing to do it.
And I said only 2 questions, but I have another one, because I'm prone to ask questions.
Good.
We're all members of the Ohio School Board Association.
Yes.
And you did say why the National Association of Pupil Transportation is against this, or has given resistance. What resistance have you found from the Ohio School Board Association?
I've spoken to Pete Japikski, Japikse, from Ohio School Board Association. I spoke to him for 40 minutes. I gave him the best information I could find. I sent him something very similar to what I sent to you. His conclusion was, it's nice to do, but it's not necessary. And all you do is have to look at, if you look at the first video I have listed here, the simulation of the bus turning over, and the video that we saw yesterday.
Yeah, that's everywhere.
How could you deny that the seatbelts were not a benefit in that situation? We could have had fatalities yesterday. I think, those kids bouncing around, one of them could have broken his neck just like that.
I have
Yes,
a
sir.
question actually to build on Mrs. Etter's question. So the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration required that automobiles would be have to have seat belts in 77, and then small buses in what is it 68, 77, and motor coaches in 2016. So what is the resistance? Because it seems like that if you're looking at small buses and motor coaches, it's the same risk.
Yes, NHTSA, and I've talked to folks there about this, the conclusion that they came to was if they force school districts to do this, what the school district, the ones that couldn't afford it, what they would do is they cut back on the school bus service. So instead of, you have to live more than a half a mile from the school to get service, they would extend it to a mile. And what that would do is put more kids on the road, on bicycles, walking on the sidewalk, in their parents' cars. All of those things present more of a risk than riding on the school bus. And make no mistake about it, I want kids in that safe bus. The seat belts enhance the safety, but that school bus is the safest vehicle on the road, and it was designed that way. But rollovers and side crashes, all bets are off.
Yeah, because it's the same risk from that perspective. Because if you're in a motor coach, it's required.
Yeah.
And basically that same rollover risk exists there for the same amount of people. And same with even a smaller school bus, the same thing is there, but it's a smaller number of people. So it's it doesn't make a lot of sense. Well,
No,
federal-
it doesn't, but
It comes down to money. If
It's
you
a dollars and
think
cents.
about it,
Yeah, it's
I can tell you,
expensive.
I took,
Money and risk.
there's
I
no-
took the bus driver training class back in the
It's
80s, and I
risk.
sat and listened to when I was trained at that time, the argument, and much of what Dr. Breglia has presented to you, the padded seats and some of that type of thing, and it's a cost issue as well. I've heard anywhere between $8,000 and $15,000, and so I've heard the other side of that from the training part of it. Also, the difficulty in a crash of getting students out of the seat belts, especially young students. So I'm not to argue with you, but I've heard both sides of this to some extent, so.
Well, and also to enforce it, that's great to say, oh, we have a rule, but again, having 3 kids that ride the bus, just the stories they tell me, no one's gonna be there to enforce it. I mean, you've got a bus driver, but to enforce 40 kids on a bus strapped in properly, let's be realistic.
Yeah, it adds to the length of the run.
We
At the
need
bare
to move
minimum.
on. We have a lot.
Okay, yeah.
I could see both sides, and buses are yellow, and they have flashing lights for a
We could
reason.
probably talk about this for about 4 hours, but we really have a lot of that.
So,
The idea
two
about
sides.
kids have as I said, the safety habit. So you can build on that. will every one of them do it the first day? I think the little kids, 5th grade and below, I don't think you'll have any problem with them. It's the middle school and the high schoolers, that's where you have a problem. And the teachers, the bus driver, the parents, all have to be in on this and encourage the kids to buckle up, because it's their lives. And also a strong school policy, and it has worked out. I was given the number that 20% of the school buses in the United States now have seat belts. You can see 22% of the states either have regulations or, so there's a lot of experience out there. And is it going to be easy? No. It's new equipment and a new approach, and the kids are used to, being free. And so you do have to counter that. As far as getting the kids off the bus, let's say you have a fire, right? You have a crash and a fire. Well, what happens is, if you have the seatbelt on, you'll be shaken up in that crash, but you'll be able to pop up, you'll be aware and alert, you'll be able to help your classmates, you'll be able to escape from the bus. If you don't have this safety tool, you're in a crash, you're going to be injured, you're going to be disoriented, you could be killed, you could be unconscious, and then you are not getting off that bus. So you're much better off with a seatbelt on and go through the crash rather than no seatbelt, and then you have what happened to those kids in Perry. They hit the roof. I'm lucky that none of them were unconscious. I saw a crash, and I'm going to stop. I saw a crash in Dayton, Ohio, and you probably saw it on TV. There was a crash. The bus went over. I think it was someone went through a stop sign. The kids exited the back of the bus. It was on its side, but they were able to get out of the back of the bus, except for a 6-year-old. The 6-year-old stayed with the bus driver and was completely disoriented, couldn't do anything. So if you had a fire on that bus and the bus driver was incapacitated, that kid would have, and they didn't have seat belts. So, there is a really big benefit in having this.
Dr. Breglia, thank you
Yes,
so
sir.
much for your
Okay.
time, for your passion, your commitment to this cause.
Okay.
It's very much appreciated. We will take this under advisement and proceed accordingly.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, anything, certainly give me a call, answer any questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next up, John Britton, and Associate, here to talk to us a little bit about we're talking about capital improvement plans, and John is going to talk to us a little bit about some possible levies that we might consider and what those look like. We've talked roundabout about them, but we want to go to the expert here. And
Great to see you all. Thanks for having me.
sorry, John was locked out. He had to call me. He said he thought it had been ironic that we had a public meeting and locked the doors of the school building. But
Round door.
So, good to see you all again. And a couple things. First of all, I wanted to start this conversation by talking to you about everything I know about levies. Oh, okay, I don't know much. I do have a partner who I'm introducing to you tonight, Gary Stadronsky, who chairs this section of our practice, and he's agreed to come in, so I'm just kind of the chaperone for the evening. That's it. So Gary Stadronsky.
Thank you. Heard a memo passing around.
thanks, Gary.
We kind of follow through. Rather basic. I didn't know what I was getting into when John said to come up and present. Other than the fact that you guys might want to do some school construction and wanted to know what your options were with respect to financing that. So we've presented here in this memo the options as we see them. There's several of them. The ones at the end, is bond counsel here?
Yes.
Okay, so they'll address that. We don't do bond work in our firm anyway, but those are options available to you, and they'll be able to discuss those too. We just included those at the end. But quickly as we go through it, first option is just to fund construction with existing resources. I don't know the specific type of project you have. I imagine it's you don't have enough money to pay for it, which is why you had us present these tax levy options. That probably doesn't work for you. If you move down to number 2, you can fund construction with traditional tax levies. You can go up to a maximum of 5 years or for a continuing period of time if the levies for current expenses or permanent improvements. You can also fund a specific permanent improvement with this type of tax levy, but then you're limited to just 5 years. And I had seen an email from Tom to John saying we wanted to go continuing, so that may be out of the question. You would go continuing just for general permanent improvements. One of the concerns I would have with doing that, whether you go 5 years or you can go less than that, 5 years or continuing, is that if you go 5 years and not continuing, then you have to renew the levy, which is subject to a vote. If you go continuing on that type of levy, that is subject to the voters getting together and having a petition signed with sufficient signatures, submitting that to reduce that levy. So continuing levies can be reduced. So imagine you pass that for 10 mills and a group of citizens don't like it. This can happen once every 5 years, this type of petition and election. They don't like it and they say, well, we're going to reduce that down to 2, and you pass it at 10. And that theoretically can happen. So for many reasons, I think districts typically fund large construction projects through issuing bonds and then paying for them through a tax levy because that risk isn't there. And you don't have to keep going back to the voters as well for a levy that might be 5 years, every 5 years to get them to approve it. So that's a risk you would have if you just went that route with this type of levy. Okay? Now I know the dual purpose levy was also discussed, so we include that here. The dual purpose in your case would be for current expenses and permanent improvements. And I think Tom had sent John an email saying, what about the example of, at first we might do 8 mills for permanent improvements, which would be on the building, and then 2 mills at the same time you're levying this, total of 10, 8 on PI and 2 on operating. That's what a dual purpose levy does. You can split up that total millage. Again, you can go continuing on this one. You can go a maximum of 5 years as well, but you still face those risks we just talked about with respect to the other levy.
Jerry, can I ask a question?
Sure.
And the more I'm reading, the more I think that I must have misread something initially. I thought I saw something where the dual purpose at some point in time you could write the language so if it were 8 and 2 PI operating, that at some point in time you could then turn it to 2 and 8. Is that a possibility?
So the very last point on here on page 1 would let you do that. So imagine that you're 8 and 2 at first, and let's say you pass just a 5-year levy subject to renewal. You're at 8 and 2, and you say, well, we're going to do that for the first 3 years. We want that then to flip. 2 for PI, 8 for operating for the last 2 years of the levy. You can do that under this type of levy. You can specify that in your resolution.
But can you change it? Like if you specify it in a resolution, you can't change it?
You'd be stuck.
Okay.
And if we're could we also say with the continuing, and here's what I'm getting at, Gary. We priced out a capital improvement project. We're looking at a big number, but we're also looking at maybe phasing it in. So we thought if we did one that was front-loaded PI for maybe the first 8 to 10 years, and then but we know we still going to need some operating as a part of that, and then after 10 years, just kind of flop that number to be front-loaded operating, because, and then just have some continuing PI because we're in an 80-plus-year-old building, and we know that there's going to be ongoing issues with it. Is that within reason, or is that
within what you could do?
Yeah.
You could choose to do that if you were able to run a continuing levy, and you'd have to specify in the resolution and then on the ballot what you're doing. So you'd have to have a pretty good idea of it too, to say we're going to do 8 and 2 for the first 10 years and then thereafter flip it or change it somehow.
So you can do a sliding scale from year to year, so like 8 and 2 1 year, 6 and 4, 5 and 5. You couldn't do that unless you wrote it into the resolution.
Well, with the way the statute's written, I think in theory you could change it from year to year.
Just makes it more confusing to explain to the voters now.
Yeah,
Exactly,
it would
and I
be.
don't think most districts do that,
Yeah.
probably for that reason.
Could you take it back to the voters, like, or do you need to, like, if you go to change that amount? Or is that, am I like really in La La Land? You know what I mean? Like, if let's say we had, I don't even know how to speak this, but 8 and 2 or whatever, and then we want to change it, can we, like, put it back to the voter? Like,
You
Amend
amend it.
it?
you amend it and then you put it out, so, but that would be easy.
So you don't
People
change the
wouldn't like
millage, you
that.
just change the allocation, you're saying?
Yes,
So if
thank
you-
you.
If it's up for renewal, and this would be on the next page, so this is not continuing, though. It's
Yeah,
up for
we
renewal.
never had it.
You may renew one or more of the levies, or increase or decrease the rate of the tax levied under the statute for the purpose of providing funds for either current expenses or general permanent improvements. So when it's up for renewal, you can do things like that. If it's continuing in nature. Okay?
Thank you.
So, I would say, if it's a huge construction project, $50 million, I don't think most districts in the state fund a project like that with this type of tax levy. Okay? I think they go the bond route, and I would imagine it's probably
I've never
90+%.
I've never even heard that you could do capital improvements. I always thought bond issues were specifically for capital improvements.
Well, you could take your existing money you have now, and you would probably have some money in the permanent improvement fund, and you can use that money to construct permanent improvements, and that has a very broad definition, but construction of buildings would be one thing you can do with it. So,
Permanent improvement money can only be used for permanent improvements, so anything designated that. Now, we can move operating money into the permanent improvement fund, so if we passed, let's say an 8 and 1, or 8 and 1 mil of PI, we could designate for a couple of years operating money to go into the PI to pay for improvements in the district. But it can't be moved out of PI for operating, so.
So as our levy stands now, is there a percentage of?
We have no,
levy-
we've never had a PI here
Right,
in our
okay.
district. The only money in PI is the recovery money from the technology scandal.
And yet we have money in capital
Because
improvement.
as a district, we move money in the
Into
PI. There's a lot of discussion as to why that was done, but it was done.
I thought we also put the income tax money into PI, didn't we?
Yeah.
And the board
Right.
just chose to put it there.
Well, our
It's not,
some of the tax abatements, and David's sitting back there, and I know he's helped us with that, but some of the abatements that we saw in some of the villages, some of that money's been
Yeah.
designated for PI.
but that was a decision the board made, I mean, it's not like
But
that.
understand, that's kind of,
I just,
we only have one current agreement.
I don't know, I've always heard that when there was anything that had to do with constructing or changing something structural with your building, with your school building, it was always designated as a bond issue.
It can be, it doesn't have to be. Understand, if you're going to take a bond issue, you're also going to incur interest on that bond, because your bond is essentially you're taking a loan. What we've talked about from the get-go with this was a pay-as-we-go and not incurring any interest expenses on this, so, and that's pretty much the charge we've given Jason, is to kind of break this down into stages so that we would not incur interest in any renovations that we did to the district. We are a debt-free district right now, and then a bond issue, then we're going to incur debt, and I think just kicking numbers around on it, just for lack of a better term, on a $50 million bond, you might be looking at $17 million in interest.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Well, we talked about it too, because there's nothing capital improvement wise that we have to do. Like, none of there's no immediacy.
And that's why with a PI, if we put money in a PI fund, you don't have to spend it in a given year. So if we're going to replace boilers that we know are going to cost $3 million, and we're putting $500,000 in a year, we might wait 5 or 6 years to do the boiler replacement and let that money build up in the PI fund, or move some operating money into PI to do that. John, you're nodding your head, am I right?
Yeah. And you may remember at our last meeting, I spoke of the capital improvements going on at the Career Center, and they're moving money from the general fund to the PI fund to make that happen. There is no PI levy either there.
Yeah, so money from the general fund can be transferred to any other fund. It's just hard to transfer it out, sometimes not possible, but that's why operating funds could be put into the permanent improvement fund and then used to buy or construct permanent improvements. Buses are a permanent improvement. So,
And what we're talking about is going to be additional to the levy that is the continuing levy that we have.
It would be a part of it. So we're talking about a two-phase. We know we're going to need operating money based on our 5-year forecast. Along with that, we want to start to work on capital improvement projects. So instead of putting two separate levies on, a PI levy and an operating levy, we're looking at a dual-purpose levy, one levy. And if you see, a lot of districts will have a bond issue and an operating levy side by side, and they risk one passing, one not passing. And we've seen districts pass bond issues and not pass operating levies, and then the community said, you built this building, now you can't heat it, or you can't operate it because you don't have operating funds. Who did that planning? So, you know, the premise that we've worked under is that we know we're going to need, somewhere down, and there's no immediate needs, but we know that it's an 81-year-old building. We've had pipes going the last 2 weeks that need to be replaced. We're going to start running into some big dollar items when you start talking about boiler replacement. You saw the cost of boiler replacement from Jason's. Now, we know that our boilers are good for probably the next maybe 5 to 10 years, but at some point in time, when boilers go, that's a big expense. We're excess of $1 million to replace a boiler in the piping, in the elementary boiler, in the middle school, high school, because it's a bigger boiler system.
So again, it would be like a continuation or addition to what we're already doing?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And now understand, through the years, and we've used the example that, you know, our roofing project is 35 years old. So 35 years ago, that was kind of a stroke of genius to develop a rotation. Our roofs get worked on every year. Our roofs are in good shape right now because our building's in good shape because our maintenance department has done a fantastic job. They put a lot of attention in the building. It's an 81-year-old building. It's a 67-year-old building next door. We have, like I said, in the last 2 weeks, we've had two pipes burst above Mr. Coleman's office and above Mrs. Smith's classroom. And if you pull some of the ceilings, you'll see a lot of clamps and rubber fittings on pipes because it's 81-year-old pipe. In the steam system, the return water in the steam system is very acidic and it eats pipes away. And that's my knowledge of growing up working in greenhouses off of Shaft Road. But that water is very, very acidic and it's hard on, and that's why we're starting to get, because right now we still have a steam system. They don't put steam systems in buildings anymore. They put hot water systems in, so it's you don't get that acid eat, but it's also a different size pipe that would have to go into the buildings as well. So that's a major undertaking. We know that some of the projects go into LED lighting that the numbers we're given on that are somewhere between a 5 and 7 year return on investment. In other words, that the savings from going to an LED lights will almost pay for itself in 5 to 7 years, based on, you know, the numbers that Jason's given us and the lighting people that have come in. So there's some things that, but we know that if we want to add air conditioning, we have to upgrade electrical. We can't just pop air conditioning units and we don't have enough power to run it in the middle school. So those all come with an 80-plus-year-old buildings, almost 7-year-old building next door. So, I'm sorry, I got on my soapbox there for a little bit.
you're fine. I mean, some districts have problems like that with boilers, and they'll run a 2 mil PI levy and tell the public, this is what we're going to do with that money when you pass it. And because it's specifically designated as permanent improvement money, it's got to go into that fund, and it's got to be used for that. You can't take it and use it to pay teachers. So this would be combining them into one issue. Gets on the ballot in one issue. You've got funds for funding those types of permanent improvements that you're going to make, also have operating funds at the same time. So that's the concept. Okay. Any other questions on that? You can also run an income tax levy, so I included that option on there too.
How successful are those?
Tough, I believe. Depends on the community.
Nobody in Cuyahoga County.
Yeah.
You see them in rural areas.
You do, yeah.
You see them in rural areas. No, there's not a school district in Cuyahoga County that
I
has
thought
that.
Euclid had one,
No.
didn't they?
Euclid?
Yeah, that's what I thought. And they did theirs before the law changed.
Yeah.
They were in that 1-year gap when you could pass an income tax levy and apply to citizens and workers, and now it's only residents.
Yeah, it's,
So income
you
tax
see the
levies
rural
are-
districts, not, if you look at the 8 major metropolises throughout the state, Newcomb might be the only one of those counties that has a income tax. Cloverleaf School District has had one for like a 1% out there. It's just more successful on the rural districts, for whatever reason.
To kind of circle back to one of your opening comments, I think I heard you say that your firm doesn't do bond work, but rather it does exclusively levy work. Is that, did I understand it correctly?
We would do anything.
Or
for a school
primarily.
district. The only thing we don't do is bond work. We don't have bond counsel.
Okay.
We typically refer that stuff out to other firms just because we don't have it. I'd love to, but we don't. And you really need specific training to do it. It's not like I can just figure out how to do it on my own. I don't have anyone to teach me. And
But you don't get Nancy there.
Yeah, the malpractice insurance is really expensive. I don't want to mess up. But one of the questions she asked while you guys were talking was, could you just run an operating levy, make it continuing? So that would be, say, a 10 mil levy for operating funds, make it continuing, and then could the board pass a policy that says each year we're going to transfer X amount into the PI fund? And we do have clients who have done that. For specifically the issue of the boilers, I can think of one district in particular that has done just that, to do a boiler replacement project that was, I think, a couple $1 million project. So that would be an option too, because once you get the money in, you can transfer it to any other fund in the district. And then, so to me, it'd be really just a question for you, are we more likely to pass a levy that's phrased as that, as operating on the ballot, or one where we actually say it's going to be for permanent improvements, and then tell the public what you're going to do with
The
it?
first one seems like it's not very transparent, that people might see that as not being very
Which one,
transparent.
the one that you just talked?
The very
So-
first one, the first one he just talked about.
I could imagine
Full
it.
operating
I
one.
think, I don't know if you know our history, but we've had board members try to take advantage and not believe in public education. So therefore, I think, we've also had a guy embezzle millions of dollars. So,
Okay.
The trust factor with the community might be a little bit rough.
Yeah.
with
That's why I'm
something like that,
thinking-
transparency.
Yeah, I was curious
You
about
said
how
fif-
that district managed to sell that. I mean, do you know?
It was a career center, and I think it was a little easier
Well,
for them.
I'm just
Yes, it
saying,
would
the
be.
first one that you spoke of as just being strictly an operating levy, just saying it that way, I'm not sure if it's transparent enough and fair enough to our community. That's all I'm saying.
I get what you're saying.
That's all I'm saying.
That's a lot of work to explain to the voters. And quite honestly, we have a situation, the electronic billboard, that the board that signed that agreement wrote that resolution in 1998, and that money's earmarked for, so that doesn't go into, that money's earmarked for the athletic facility. So you have the ability as the Board of Education to write a resolution to how you may want to do that. And we've all been a part of it. That question comes up, how come we put in a new football field and we didn't put air conditioning in? Because I can't use that money
Right.
for air conditioning.
Exactly.
Because of what the board designated that for,
Yeah.
athletics.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Good information.
Thanks.
Yeah, and then the last items on there are just the bond issues, which I'm sure you'll hear about. But you can do a combined tax levy with the bond issue, so that's on there, but I'm sure you'll hear more. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to meet everyone.
Next up is Jason and Galen Sherline from Galen's with Retzel. And actually, we have some, she also works with us through the First Ring Collaborative, and she kicked my butt in fantasy football this year, too, somehow she got my fantasy football. So, I didn't know Galen was coming to do the presentation tonight, so.
I wanted to talk, I sort of have two hats because I'm a shareholder in Retzel and Andrus, but I also run our consulting division, which is Retzel Consulting Solutions, and I do a lot of levy and bond issues and run the campaigns. So I kind of have dual hats on, if you will, tonight. And the reason I was asking about that levy language is I think what's really important for you to consider is simplicity in what you're doing. I would hate to say for year 1 through 3, we're going to do this, and then year 3, because the language will just, I'm hyperventilating back there with how long the language will get. Which is why I was wondering if we could do it another way, just to keep it simple. But I understand your history as well. So in terms of choosing which way which levy to go with, I guess what I would like to know is how much operating do you need and when? Because you're exactly right. You don't want to build or fix a building and then not be able to operate it or have that perception out there. So is it an imminent need for operating or?
No, it's going to be in the 5th year, according to our
Oh, the 5th
forecast.
year. Oh, that's.
That's forever.
That's
There's
great.
no imminent.
It's just okay. So just in my experience, for what it's worth, I think that when you're looking at these different options, I think, like I said, simplicity is very important, and I think you have to decide, number one, is this just for maintenance, or is there anything that the district wants to add on that we can say, hey, you're going to get this. I think I saw reference to maybe a gymnasium or something else.
Field house.
A field house, okay. So I think that in considering which way to go, you have to look at what your sales point is and whether that's you're saving money by upgrading the HVAC and different things, or if it's just straight maintenance, or if it's some amenity that they're voting on. But I would suggest that if there's an amenity or something that's being added, I would consider a bond issue, because I like the way that it's a finite amount of money and you know exactly what you're getting. And I think that people do understand that if you're making efficiencies and you're building in the PI type program, that's what the cost is. I also understand your concern that you don't want to take on a lot of debt, or you want to be able to do it as you go along. So if it is a PI, I think you can sell that as well. I'm a little bit nervous about a combined PI operating, particularly if you don't need the operating funds for several years later. I think in terms of being transparent with the community, you have done a good job of maintaining your buildings. You're trying to be proactive again, and this is what we're getting, and this is the way that we're paying for it, and this is why it's efficient. So, my firm does a lot of bond counsel work. We work with a lot of school districts. I've done a lot of bond issues. I've also done issues where we're dedicating money by board policy, which is why I asked the question. In the case that I did it last, it was with the Cuyahoga County Library, and it was because they didn't have bonding authority. So we dedicated $500,000 to capital improvements and did a $100 million capital program. And it worked. The way that we messaged it was that it was going to be this amount, that $500,000 was going to be dedicated only to capital. And we didn't get a lot of questions about what if board policy changes or things like that. But I also recognize that was in 2008 when Facebook was new and social media was very new, and it's a different time, and you guys have the trust that you want to always be reinforcing. So I think my firm does a lot of bond work. We're happy to work with that, should that be the direction that you go. But also, because I do so many campaigns, I also want to be able to answer any questions that you guys may have about the campaigning process or anything like that.
Questions for Galen?
I agree with you. Simplicity is best. And that's all I'm going to say.
And the other thing that was mentioned was that you have a selling point.
Yes.
We go into a campaign with a very specific objective and goal that you can put in
Yes.
3 words on the sign.
Yes. And I know you're doing a lot of community engagement right now, and I think through that process, you're going to be able to come up with messaging and working with your folks and the GPD to find whether it's efficiencies, right? Whether it's just good common sense because you're saving money, because you're, without maintaining, your operating costs are going up. Or if it is getting a field house, if it is getting something else, if it's LED lights, if it's more efficiencies, if it's solar, whatever it is that you're looking at. But I think you should have the story, figure out how you want to tell that first, And then I would really suggest that, I know you like to go continuing. If we're gonna go continuing, I would just suggest that we make it as simple as possible, and then we can be open and transparent with the community. But a lot of people don't read the ballot language. It's some people who do, and if they want to make a big deal out of it and it's confusing,
Yep.
it makes people more likely to vote no.
Right.
So.
Thank you. Gail, also,
Thank you.
through the first string, we were talking about ed choice, Mark, and Gail has spent her share of time with the Academic Distress Commission and doing some lobbying and with the ed
Yeah.
choice. That was what our discussion was prior to this, about some of the things that are going on, and Gail has a pretty up close and personal knowledge of some of the things going on in Columbus right now, so.
So I consult for school districts for like 20 years, mostly on the consulting side, not on the legal side. But about 4 years ago, I said, you know what, I got to start using my law degree again, and so I went to a firm. But I said, I'm not billing in like 6-minute increments, so we're gonna start a consulting division. So I consulted for Lorraine schools while they went through the academic distress process, and then we knew that he was gonna make it. So started going to First Ring Superintendent's Collaborative, and to their credit, they really took a lead, and we built a coalition of people. And really, I think that it's a credit to the work that you guys have been doing, that we're making traction. I mean, it's slow, it's tedious, it's one step forward, two back sometimes, but I do think we have their attention, and I think last year that the academic distress commissions were the key issue at the legislature, that they couldn't come up with a solution, but there's a lot of conversation about it. And now you're seeing the same thing with ed choice in this whole conversation. I mean, these poor guys just want to go home, pass capital budget, and go home and campaign, but they're fighting, and it's a big conversation. But at least we're at the table, they're listening. We've got a good group of superintendents, yours included, that are really providing a lot of information and bothering these legislators to hopefully do the right thing. Is that politically correct enough?
Thanks, Gail, that was good.
Do you have a card?
I did. God, I hope so.
Or just, one of my things, I always have to have like the things written down right, but the names and stuff like that.
I know, with a name like Gail and Shoreline, you're like, what is that? How do you spell that?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sure you have enough now.
Thank you. Last one.
Do you go by Gail or Galen?
Galen.
Oh, I didn't have that right.
It's a boy's name, but my mom thought it built character.
And how'd that work out for you?
It's fantastic.
Good job.
Thanks, Gail. Thanks, Jason. And I see David back there. Actually, Mayor Piasecki was supposed to be here to talk to us about a TIF this evening, and unfortunately had a death in the family, so he could not be here. So, David, I'm going to put you at the mic and ask you to do a little, if you could, do a little education with with the Board of Education about exactly what a TIF is and what it means to us as a district and what we may be looking at. I'm really sorry that the mayor's not here to at least hear what he had to present, but
Thank you. It's good to see you all. I'm going to give you a few principles of what a tax increment financing. In this community, in your 3 villages, an incentive that's often been used has been abatements through the community reinvestment program, where, and we discussed before, and there was a recent project where a business receives 100%, up to 100% abatement for 15 years. And if the payroll is over $1 million, the school board can share half of the payroll taxes. And if the abatement is over 50%, the school board approval is necessary for the abatement. That's one type of incentive program that's available. And that, with an abatement, the taxpayer, the business, benefits because they can reduce the amount of property taxes they have to pay. Another type of incentive is called tax increment financing. With tax increment financing, the taxpayer continues to pay full property taxes on the property, but the taxes are diverted for use for the project. Let me explain a little bit further. With tax increment financing, and a couple examples in our areas, one just opened up is Topgolf in Independence. Or you could look at in Cleveland, many of the downtown projects have tax increment financing. Or Tucker Park, First and Main and Hudson, downtown Kent. With tax increment financing, as I said, the taxpayer continues to pay full taxes, but the taxes, like we all pay property taxes, the taxes are paid to the county treasurer. The county then will can then send the taxes to the city or village in this case, and conceivably return all of the taxes back to the taxpayer. I'll get into the school board role in a second. But essentially, think of tax increment financing. Imagine on your own home, if you could receive all of your property taxes back every year, what you could do with those property taxes. You could put an addition on your home. You could then go to a bank and leverage that annual flow of revenue and use it to finance new construction or addition.
So if I could interrupt you just a second, are they always like that? Because I thought TIFs would be used for things like improving the roadway in front of a new building.
That's one of them. I'll get into that.
Okay, all right. So,
But
but
the
it can
idea
be an actual tax
of a
rebate.
TIF is that, I'm talking now about the private developer TIF, is that for a private developer, the developer can use all of the taxes that they pay for their project, subject to various rules for school board participation. And I'm going to go into your point in a second.
Okay. Sorry, didn't mean to get ahead of you.
No, you're fine. But with the TIF, if the TIF is for more than 10 years, or the percentage of the exemption is greater than 75%, school board approval is necessary. So for a project, if you want more than 10 years or you want more than 75%, school board approval is necessary. I just worked on a TIF in Seven Hills, the new project that's on Rockside Road for a large housing development. And that's a 30-year TIF. I'll use that as an example because it has a public component and a private component. So for that project in Rockside Crossing in Seven Hills, right on Rockside Road, the developer is going to receive a private developer TIF. The school board, Parma Schools, is going to receive 25% of the taxes it would normally collect over 30 years instead of receiving 100%. The city of Seven Hills had to go to Parma Schools for approval because the length of the term of the TIF was greater than 10 years and the percentage of the TIF being 100% was greater than 75%. And that allowed the school board to negotiate a compensation agreement with the city of Seven Hills and the developer, and the agreement was that on the commercial component on Rockside, the school board would receive 25% of what they normally collect. On the residential component in the rear of the property, where there are a lot of roads have to be constructed and utilities have to be brought in, they're using the other type of TIF. It's called a public infrastructure TIF. And that TIF is going to be used to fund the costs of the roads, sewers, and other public infrastructure costs. And in that case, again, it's 100% for 30 years. The school board and Parma Schools negotiated a compensation agreement to receive 50% of the revenue it would normally receive. The projection for that development is that Parma Schools could receive expected to receive a new revenue of $1 million a year that they're not receiving now. But they are giving up, they had to make concessions, they're giving up the potential to receive $2 million on a piece of land that's been vacant for forever, as you all probably live in the area, as you see. Another example of a public infrastructure TIF is on Rockside Road in Independence, where all of Rockside Road in Independence in the commercial corridor has a public infrastructure TIF. And so as the values of property go over a base value, the additional revenue that comes into the county from all those businesses and commercial owners on Rockside Road paying taxes, in that example, the school board, independent schools, is held harmless. They receive full compensation. So the taxes are paid by all the commercial taxpayers when there's what's called a base value. The taxpayer, on the base value, the taxes are distributed in the normal course to all the taxing entities. So let's say an office building had a value of $10 million when the TIF was created. So in the first $10 million of value, the taxes on that first $10 million are distributed to all the taxing entities in the normal course. But let's say the building has a value of $20 million. On the next $10 million of value, so let's say the taxpayer's paying value on a $20 million building, so in the next $10 million, the county is distributing the school board share directly to the school board, holding the school board harmless. The balance is not distributed to the City of Independence and the county and the library. Instead, it's used by the City of Independence to pay for bonds that were issued for public infrastructure improvements and ongoing infrastructure improvements. So the fundamental rules, there's two types of TIFs: public infrastructure under section 570940 and private infrastructure under 570941. They both require school board approval if you want to go over 10 years or 75%. Inevitably, developers or villages, municipalities will want to go to the maximum of 30 years, 100%, and negotiate a compensation agreement with the school board. Now, in the ideal situation for a school board is to be held harmless, that you receive full revenue as you would in the normal course. The benefit in either a private or public infrastructure TIF is that the village, in our case, can provide an incentive to a developer if it's private. If it's public, the village can use the funds to pay for infrastructure improvements that they would have to find another source of revenue for. It allows a local government to have access to funds to fund the improvements, while the taxpayer continues to pay full taxes. That's why I started out with talking about the abatements, because with the abatements, you don't pay, you have a tax, it's a tax, I don't want to say call it tax freeze, it's a tax cut, you're not paying taxes. With a TIF, taxes are continue to be paid. However, other than what's negotiated with the school board, the funds are either diverted to the city for public use or right back to the developer for private use.
Can I ask,
Go ahead.
again, this is like way over what I understand, but
You did a nice job.
what would the benefit be of a TIF for a school district? Is there a benefit?
For the school district, I wouldn't say a benefit. There is a benefit of a TIF over an abatement, because with an abatement, you lose the property taxes.
Yes.
Especially if you're not made up to the loss of revenue by the sharing of payroll taxes.
Okay.
There's a couple benefits of a TIF. Less for you. One benefit with other school districts that rely heavily on state money is that property that's TIF is actually treated as exempt property, so it's not necessarily reported as taxable property to the Department of Education. So the $100 million building is constructed, it's actually treated as if it's on the exempt list of the public building that we're in now, and not on the tax list. So in the reporting to the Department of Education, it's not on the list of taxable property that they use to determine state aid. That's one benefit, but that's not really, for you all, it's not a significant benefit. With the TIF, the ideal situation is that you're held harmless. And that's it. In that case, there's really no difference. If we don't have any TIFs here in this community, but if we have one where you're held harmless, then there'll be no impact, no difference for the treasurer receiving it. He'll just receive the same funds in a different distribution in the county. Matt, once I correct me, my understanding is incorrect, but it's a different distribution. The challenge down the road with the TIF is the same challenge we talked about with abatements. If a project comes along where you cannot be held harmless, for whatever reason, I think it's charter steel, then we go into the issue of, it's the benefit of the project, the potential of new revenue, work, conceding revenue. I'm working on a project now in Richmond Heights where the developer wants all of the revenue at a mall that's really empty. And so, south in Parma, a piece of property that's been vacant, we've had 2 or 3 developers on that hillside going,
Oh, yeah.
try to build on that hillside. So it's your colleagues in Parma is the issue. Is it better to receive some revenue now or over the next 30 years than see the site vacant for another 30 years?
Wendy, it was like what he said with the Seven Hills example. Had that TIF had not gone through and they did not do that development, there wouldn't be $1 million going to Parma School. Granted, too, if it wasn't TIFed and a developer just did it and there was a potential to have $2 million. But what if this developer said, well, no TIF, then no development, then nobody gets any money?
Let me explain one nice thing about the TIF, why developers like to use TIFs. Think of the abatement example, you don't pay taxes on that abated property. With a TIF, okay, the TIF, the money is diverted, again, you pay the taxes to the county, but now you have a dedicated stream of revenue that a developer can approach a bank to, or another lender or a bond, the port authority, to have additional source of revenue for construction funds for the project. Because there's a dedicated 30-year source of revenue to pay for that additional upfront money.
Does that set like a precedence though, like later down the line? Like, so like if we have there's prime land that would be like in like one of the communities that could be developed upon, would that basically come back and say, hey, we want that deal too? Like instead of basically like an abatement or something like that, where basically it seems like we would give up a percentage, based upon that land is going to be typically unused. In this situation, like, we were talking about that the land may be, go unused for, 30 years and we give up that revenue, but in the offset is basically, I think, what would we set a precedent if we go that way?
Well, I think the precedent, you can have a precedent where you're held harmless, what's called a school-friendly TIF.
Yeah.
Then that can be then you're held harmless.
Yeah.
And the local government has a tool to use for economic development.
Got it.
And that's been our, as we just had a discussion with NEDEC when they came into Brooklyn Heights, is about, being made whole as a district as far as, and that David worked very hard on that for us, and we appreciate that. And then, remember, the fear was, because we'd had charter and some of the other ones, if we deviate from being made whole, now what kind of precedent are we setting? If we do it in Brooklyn Heights, and then is Valley View and Cuyahoga Heights going to say, why are we doing a different deal with Brooklyn Heights than we do with...
Right.
I mean, the fact that we deal with 3 different villages, we have to take into consideration.
we always have a concern about creating a precedent, but again, when they come to you, each project is unique. Now, remember, I said 10 years, 75%. They can approach you, let me explain one little more detail. Remember on abatements, the village can approach you for 15 years or 50% without you have nothing to say about it. With a TIF, they can go ahead and approve it for 10 years or 75% without your authority or permission. And the same with the revenue sharing, let me go through one about the revenue sharing and the payroll taxes. When the village approves an abatement and the payroll's over $1 million, and you are giving up property taxes, they have to you cannot negotiate an agreement with the village, and we did with NIDAC, then they have to share 50% of the payroll taxes with you. The same rules apply with the TIF. However, if you're held harmless, you're not going to share payroll taxes. Because in that case, you're being fully compensated. You're still receiving the full property taxes.
Right.
So do we know what Valley View is thinking of doing?
But this actually almost works out better that David's given us a little bit of education about the TIF before they come in, as opposed to David kind of following up the presentation. As I sat here and thought about it, the idea was to have David be able to respond to what Valley View presented. Unfortunately, that's not taking place tonight, but I think maybe in the long run, this now gives us a little bit of an idea and gives us a little bit of a base knowledge when Valley View does come in and present to us, and then we will certainly involve David in the discussions from that point forward.
Does anyone have any questions? Because it's a little...
My brain hurts, but it's okay, I'll do it. No, I have questions, but I'm going to talk to Matt later. No, I'm good. I took notes and I'll reread them. Just a lot of stuff. I'm a counselor. I'd rather talk about feelings. I'm just saying.
So it's very much like an abatement, except the taxpayer here pays taxes and the funds can be used for the project. But schools, subject to various rules, can receive less than they would normally receive, or all of it.
That was, I think, my question.
Right,
Really,
and-
was to say we're made whole.
For lack of a better term, we've been made whole with all the abatement agreements that we've had out there. And the only time a TIF, in my time here, is entered the discussion at Cuyahoga Heights 4 or 5 years ago. It was entertained, it was taken a look at, and then they decided not to go down that road. And I don't even know what project because it never came to us. They told me that they were researching a TIF at the time, and then it never got beyond that. So.
I'm going to give one other, if this happens, I said 10 years, 75%. This is how a couple of our clients received notices in Cuyahoga County. They have townships. The township created a TIF, Bainbridge Township created a TIF for public infrastructure use, and they're going ahead, and if you're familiar with, east of Increment Falls, the township is created a TIF up to the maximum of 10 years, 75%, and they're going to use, and so there's property appreciation over the base. They're going to grab 75% of that additional revenue for 10 years to use for public infrastructure. And no school board approval is necessary, except the notice by the school board superintendent received. And they went right up to the threshold. So I guess my message, and I think the superintendent's working with the mayor, is let's look for opportunities that we can find where you're held harmless. And because of your relatively, not just you not only have a low tax rate, but your percentage of the taxes is only about 55%. So the value of the TIF is that they hold you harmless. They have access to the non-school revenue, non-school taxes for their project, either private or public.
Questions?
Thank you.
So we don't know yet what's happening in Valley View. Okay.
No, I've had a couple of councilmen talk to me, but not the details, so.
Yeah, and the mayor never contacted me. I'm part of that
I would-
economic
Yeah,
development
it's a little,
liaison position, and he's never contacted me.
Yeah, one of the unfortunate things about tips and abatements is that projects come up, people approach mayors, and then they fade away. A lot of the companies will contact every village and city and try to see who'll give them the best deal. And then there'll be some activity, and then they'll fall off. I think Tom and I have had, we had one where someone came to us 4 years ago, and then came back 3 years later,
Yeah.
after they built the building.
yeah.
After the
Soccer dome, yeah. And my understanding, I just talked to somebody, a councilman from Seven Hills, and they said that if they don't do the deal with Parma, then that builder's, he's gone, he's out. So that was critical for, for Seven Hills, in the school system, to work with them to have that property developed that had not been sat idle for a long, long time over there. So I think I haven't talked, I met with Charlie last week. I think everybody walked away from that pretty happy that it came out the way it did, so.
Well, I'm talking about, and then just with the soccer dome building.
Yeah.
They came up, met with us, they had a great idea, and then it died off for a couple of years, and then they eventually went and built it, and then they wanted an incentive after they had completed the work, which doesn't make any sense. But projects come up, and then they cool off. I get emails, and if someone wants to talk about a project, and then something else comes up.
Very good. Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, I believe the presentation.
Everybody on overload tonight? I mean, that was a lot of financial stuff here. Mr. Ellis, by the way, since you're the parent sitting in the audience tonight, I'm going to have to recruit you to go to these public meetings with me, because I might need an interpreter to help me along the way, so.
Thank goodness. So moving on to treasurer's discussion, or treasurer's business, Mr. Muccio?
Yeah, a couple of things, in the mode of talking about finance.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Did you counsel?
Oh,
Yeah.
Jason,
Is Jason going to speak to it?
and I really,
Speaking?
Jason came,
Finances are not my strong suit. We won't talk buildings again.
no, Jason came along with Galen.
Okay, that's what I thought. That's why I didn't think I was overlooking him. Are there any other presentations tonight?
No.
Okay, very good. Okay, so moving on to Mr. Muccio's
Thanks for
business.
joining us.
yeah. So, just to keep the train going, about talking finances.
It's not going to change much based on what I see here.
So, I switched out the ones I want to do. So, I have a little interactive presentation, and I want to talk about the issues coming up on the school districts in Cuyahoga County on the March primary election ballot. So, I have printed for everybody here some of the notes I took.
Is this also one of the attachments?
Correct.
That you
I just
identified
printed out
the-
the attachments that are
Oh, okay, I
online.
saw that the other day, yeah.
So that's all stapled together. I'm passing out our 5-year forecast. This is for us, Cuyahoga Heights Schools. And I also have one more sheet to pass out. This is the notes to our 5-year forecast, and it has our tax rates, along with everybody else in Cuyahoga County.
That's wrong. I've got it on the computer.
I saw this.
Fire on?
Yes.
Here, Mike, here's some copies of this too.
This is exciting.
Yeah.
Don,
Yeah.
This
I can follow along on a computer.
This brings me back to my past 8 days, when I had to do all the election stuff, coordinate all the elections.
we have 3 total.
Yes.
So my
I've
goal
never seen all
for
these.
this activity is to discuss the handful of Cuyahoga County schools on the March 17th ballot and their current 5-year forecast. So specifically, I'm looking at their levy issue and how it may impact their 5-year forecast. It's my hope that this comparison will provide us more guidance on our 5-year forecast regarding any possible future levy that we would have. So if we look at the stapled packet that we have, let's flip the page. So this is the second page of it. It's actually page 13 of 17. We have 2 proposals on there. The top one is Brooklyn City School District, and what they have is a renewal. And at the bottom, we have Cleveland Heights, University Heights, and that's an additional levy. So Brooklyn, let's look at Brooklyn first. The third page in there is Brooklyn's 5-year forecast. So what Brooklyn's looking to do is just have a renewal. So this is just a renewal for Brooklyn City Schools. So if we turn the page to their 5-year forecast, we can see that their renewal is on line 11.020. And they're getting half of that in fiscal '21. The full amount in fiscal '22 going forward. Now, if I flip back, their renewal is for a period of 7 years. So there's really not much to talk about in looking at their forecast. If we look at their bottom line, they're holding pat at about $5 million. So this renewal is crucial to them, and they're putting it on the ballot to lock in those funds going forward. Without the renewal, we can see on line 10.010, their fund balance, and in fiscal '23 and '24, the fourth and fifth year of the forecast, there's a negative. So this renewal for them is very important. And I also just want to point out one thing too. Brooklyn, on lines 4.050 and 4.060, they have debt. They have HB 264 loans, as well as the interest and fiscal charges on those loans. It's about $60,000 per year for the principal amount. So, debt. I'm always very mindful of not going into debt. That's just my mantra. Don't do it if you don't have to. Those debt payments knock out, what you can do in future years. So you always have to make those debt payments, and it takes away for other, items that you want to do. Now there is a, when you do it on the front end, they sell, for HB 264, the loan payment from the state, it was, for window and other improvements that would happen, and those improvements would, then bring a cost savings to the district that you really don't see. It's kind of buried in purchase service that you would have. So, but you do see the debt payments that are incurred. The interest is on top of anything on the principal that would be.
So are you saying for them, where you have it highlighted as renewal?
Yes.
So with this levy that they have on the ballot, so the addition, so would be, they've already, and they're anticipating the
Correct.
passage of this?
Correct.
And that's where that $1,268,000?
Correct.
And then $2,005,000?
Correct.
Okay.
The funny way that the 5-year forecast is constructed is if we look at line 12.010, that's the fund balance that's needed for certification of contracts, salary schedules, and other obligations. So the state looks at renewals as, an assured passage, more or less. And they say that you can certify contracts. We're looking at the expiration of R2 union agreements, the CBAs, and you have to certify them according to the 5-year forecast, as far as you can go. The state views renewal levies as almost an assured passage, so you can lock in.
This one says renewal, but they got that extra in there for the years commencing the 7-year period.
Yes.
That would be, this is actually not just renewal, there's an addition in there.
No, that's because you only collect half the first year.
Right. So that first year is just the half of
So the
amount.
the money that they're losing without the renewal.
Yes.
Is that in that first line? Is that what's up there, general property? I mean, where's, they're showing it as addition, so somewhere it's missing.
They lose it from that line, yes.
They lose it from that line and they're adding it in the lower line.
Correct.
Okay. I'm not
It's
used to
funny
looking
how-
at this time of report because we have no renewal stuff on that.
It is funny how that happens, but yes, that's correct.
They had to offset it somewhere.
That's the offset. So
Okay.
if it's a renewal, it's just backing it out of that first line.
Backing it out of 1.01 and
Correct.
adding it on to the bottom.
Correct.
Because in 1.01, it shows it's expired.
Correct.
Essentially, okay.
Yep.
Got it.
Because, Maria, the different year, school district 7/1 to 6/30, the different financial year, fiscal year that we have, as opposed to a calendar year when you collect property taxes, you're only collecting half in that first calendar year, 7/1 to 12/31.
Got it.
So if we go to the second page, this one's going to be a little more fun. This is Cleveland Heights, University Heights. And if we flip back to see their ballot language on the second page, this is an additional levy for Cleveland Heights, University Heights. So this is new. And let's look at their 5-year forecast. Look at the bottom line, 15.010. Look at fiscal 22, 23, and 24. What does everybody see? Large deficits. 8 million the first, 21 the second, 38 the year after. So a couple things I see. This levy that they're putting on, this additional levy, it's for 7.9 mils It's bringing in approximately $9 million for them, between $8 to $9 million. And if we look at the total revenue and total expense line, so if we look at 2.080, that's total revenue, and if we look at total expenditure line, 4.5. So the revenue, 2.080 in fiscal 20, 13 million the next year, 111, 111, 111. Now their expenses for that same period of time, 117 million, 119, 121, 123, 127. So that gap of what they're thinking is going to be brought in, about 9 million per year, is going to fit that gap in those years. So they're going to get about half that first year in 21, so it's going to be about 118. Excuse me, yeah, 118. 120 is going to be in fiscal 22, 120 in 23, and 120 in 24. So they're still going to, you're not quite there. They're still going to have kind of a deficit going, but that's probably the most they can put on with their tax rate. I mean, look at their tax rate in the county. This is Cleveland Heights University Heights.
It's already high, isn't it?
Yeah, 154. That's pretty high. Yeah.
Shaker's higher, I think. Shaker's the highest in the state.
Right. What else are they doing also? Look at 3.010.
David's a Shaker resident. He's not in setback.
190. There you go. So line 3.010, personnel services, salaries for their teachers. What are they doing in fiscal 20, 21, 22, and to an extent 23 and 24? They're keeping it at 59 million. They can't go higher. That's their cap, essentially. They're figuring out that that's the max cap that they can really pull enough revenue unless the state comes back and changes funding for them. That's it. They can't really go higher, and they're struggling to keep that down because we know in fourth and fifth year that they're deficit spending even with this new levy. So are they going to go with another new one? I mean, they're kind of at that cap. Can they give more raises, 2% each year? So it's kind of a predicament where Cleveland Heights University Heights is at right now. Just looking at the levy that they're putting on, and also too keep in mind the deficit for where they're at and where they're putting the levy on. It's in third year of the 5-year forecast, fiscal 22. So our deficit that we're looking at is in what, the 5th year that we have for us.
Have they, I don't know off the top of my head, have they had a levy recently and just it failed? Do you know?
I don't think.
I don't remember.
No, they got blasted, and they would get blasted if the Ed Choice scholarships don't change. I think the number I heard with them was almost $3 million going out of the district in Cleveland Heights. It might even been more than that, but so they are really. And Matt had their anti-levy group literature, and he sent me the website, and I just took a glance through that, and certainly I've seen I've heard their rationale, but I've also seen the other side of that, and kind of gaps in both approaches to this, but they're in a tough spot. As Matt says, they can only be taxed so much, and but plus money going out through that choice, and declining enrollment too in the district. So
I just want to point out our tax rate's 35.7, the lowest in Cuyahoga County.
Right.
If we look at, keep going on, Euclid schools and Lakewood schools, we can see that they're both on the ballot in March. Euclid, I'll just stick with them right now. They're looking to pass a levy for a period of 10 years, and this is an additional levy for them. So they actually failed one, and they're coming back just to get back to where they were at with this additional levy. We look at their 5-year forecast. Their deficit starting in fiscal 22 on the very, very bottom line, 54,000, and then it goes to 6.5 million and 14 million the year after.
Wow.
Again, this is a additional levy for them, so it's new. They also have a renewal that's going to come on in 23. So they're going to have to pass this additional levy at Euclid and also the renewal. So that's where levy fatigue comes in. That's where we're very lucky with our continuing levies, that we don't have to go out to the ballot and discuss the need for levy. Also, what does Euclid have on their 5-year forecast? Line 4.050, HB 264 debt payments that they have.
Just love that, don't you?
Theirs are high. Look at theirs, 120,000. And then they also have other debt coming in fiscal 22, 23, and 24, 300,000. So those payments, they sit on the 5-year forecast. They take away from other areas that you have. Also, with their salaries on 3.010, what's the difference between fiscal 20 and 21? It actually goes down. So fiscal 20 was at 37 million, fiscal 21's at 36 million. So they're cutting.
You think it's cuts? It's
Yeah,
not like
they've
they're losing
they've already
reserves?
announced cuts.
Okay.
Oh, it's
When
not
they, when they failed the renewal, actually, they failed 2 renewals. And the former superintendent left, new superintendent came in, they immediately announced cuts, regardless of the passage or not of the next renewal, so.
And their new treasurer, Matt Brown, was the auditor when I was an auditor too, so I know him very well. If we look at Lakewood schools, now Lakewood schools, their forecast is very similar to ours. So if we look at our forecast in Lakewood schools, it's very similar. In that, I mean, there's no debt, there's no HB 264 in their forecast or ours, and look at where the deficit is on their 5-year forecast. It's the 5th year, fiscal 24. Where's ours? The 5th year. So they're putting their levy on now. They are deficit spending on line 6.010, as with us. So they're eating away at that carryover balance. There's a need for a levy coming up. It's in the 5th year. So when we're looking at putting our levy on, you know, it's not unreasonable because Lakewood Schools is putting a levy on for themselves and their deficits in the 5th year of their forecast. If we look at the verbiage for their levy, it's something that we've been talking about. This is the combined levy, which the attorney from Enos Britton's group was talking about. So this is an additional tax for the benefit of the Lakewood City School District for the purpose of current operating expenses and for general permanent improvements at a rate not exceeding 4.9 mils, a portion 3.9 mils to current operating expenses and 1 mil to general permanent improvements for each $1 evaluation, which amounts to, and it goes on. It's a continuing period as well, commencing in 2020 and first due in calendar year 2021. So this is exactly kind of what one of the options we're looking at. Again, it's that keep it simple mantra. Maybe we don't want to go with the different, allocations, apportionment of how we want to go, but just keep it simple, do a certain amount, and kind of structure it that way. These are, I guess, getting more common as you see in school districts, but I think from what I've heard, it wasn't as common 5-10 years ago. So these are kind of, but again, our forecast, I would say, is very similar to Lakewood's as a point of reference. Flipping that page, we come to Olmstead Falls and Orange. I'm going to skip Orange. They have more money than, they know what to do with, so we're not even going to talk about them. Olmstead Falls. So they're looking at a additional levy. It's 8.9 mils, and it's for a continuing period of time. So if we look at their 5-year forecast, which is on the next page for Olmstead Falls, there's a couple interesting things going on here. So if we look at the very bottom line, 15.010, what happens with their fund balance from fiscal 19 to fiscal 20? There's a big drop-off. And then they're holding pat, 20, 21, and 22, and then it goes negative the 4th year, 23 and 24. But they had, starting out in 17 and 18, $8 million. So something happened to cause them to drop very suddenly. They actually had raises in their CBA, and I was reading their notes to the 5-year forecast. So they had raises of 2.75 in fiscal 18, 2.75 in fiscal 19, and 3% in fiscal 20. So fiscal 20 is the year we're in right now, and that's a big drop. And we can see that their salaries went up. So 3.010 personnel services from 19 to 20 goes from 25 to 27. Then it goes down in 21 to 25, 25, 26. What they're doing in 21 and 22, according to the notes of their 5-year forecast, is, and I'm going to read it straight from here, future years, 2021 and 22, reflect a base freeze due to the financial position the district is in. So they gave raises to the tune of 2.75 for 2 years and 3%, and now they're doing a base freeze after that. Well, you really don't want to give raises and then do a base freeze on the opposite side. It's kind of counterintuitive. Also, too, I was looking at some of the literature that they put out, and I've highlighted that the district is serious about reducing expenses by proactively making cuts and reductions right now, which will reduce the impact to voters in the March levy. The plan includes more than $3 million in reductions, including not filling retired positions, reductions in professional development, slashing all building and department budgets by 25%, and deferring or canceling purchases of new school buses, supplies, and other materials. So right now, Olmstead Falls is cutting approximately $3 million. They have base freezes, and they're keeping their bottom line, steady with, less than $1 million. but they gave raises in the previous 3 years. So it's just something to be mindful about, giving raises and how that's going to be calculated in the 5-year forecast. You have to be accurate about that, because if you're not and it catches you off guard, you're in a detrimental position. You have to go out to the voters and say, we need a levy additional for X amount. So it's just something to kind of keep in the back of your head when you're calculating raises, that, you gotta, it's very important. And the amounts creep up too, a percentage point here or there for a school district with a budget of, $40, $50 million as Olmstead Falls. That's significant. So, again, their deficit, that they're looking at is fiscal '23, but they're making cuts now to probably unfavorable to the student population in the school district, I could say. If we turn the page, I'm going to skip orange. If we just look at their bottom line, 15.010, they're sitting at 20 million, so they're okay. These are the last two that we have. We have Parma and we have South Euclid-Lyndhurst. Parma, if we look at the verbiage that they have, I'm looking at the last sentence that they, and again, Parma's going for renewal. Now, their renewal is commencing in 21, first due in 22, so I guess they're going early because they're not collecting it for another year. It's not due till 22 and commencing in 21.
Why would they do
Why would they go early? So if we turn the page to their 5-year forecast, their renewal is on 11.020. It could be levy fatigue that's out there. I know Parma's been talking about a bond issue that's going out. Maybe not having too many levies going at the same time, but also, too, with that renewal on line 11.020 for Parma, what's in the 5th year of their forecast, and to an extent, what's in the 4th year of the forecast, 23 and 24. You have a large deficit in 24, even with that renewal in place. And in 23, you're looking at $600,000 for Parma with a budget of $160 million.
So do you think that they're going to be asking for another levy? Like,
Yes,
shortly
absolutely.
That's why
Yes.
you have it now.
I think they're going for the renewal right now, bond issue, and then they're going to go for another new one.
They had a renewal not get on due to a filing error last year.
They missed the deadline.
And they also, their bond issue would be a two-phase bond issue. So the bond issue that you're hearing about in Parma is not the entire bond issue. That's the high schools and the restructuring. They have a second bond issue that will then deal with the elementary buildings later on. So that's what their plan is.
Yeah, I saw their January newsletter. I didn't get a copy, but it looks like they're planning to replace every building.
Eventually, they're going to get some OFC money too. They're going to get about, if they pass the bond issue, I think that they're going to get close to 50% from the state on the building, but it's still a lot of money.
Right, it's not, and it's, they didn't say here are the dates, so they're just talking about it.
No.
But still, that's pretty ambitious.
It's very ambitious, sir.
They're going to take, they're going from like 16 buildings to 9 or something.
Yeah, they'll great reduction. They'll go from 3 high schools to 2 high schools. And actually, the thought was always Parma was going to stay, but Parma's going to turn more into it's Valley Forge and Normandy, and they'll rename the buildings, but they'll be east and west with their high
East and
school.
west with one of them being
And
the
then
central
Parma will
office.
be reused as a central office and also some other additional community service tie-ins, much the same way Wadsworth did with their construction.
And for the last school district we have, which is South Euclid-Lyndhurst, if we look at the ballot language, they're also going for that combined levy. So this is, again, something we're looking at on the radar. What they're doing is, I won't read the whole levy, but they're going for 6.9 mils, 5.9 to current operating with 1 mil to general permanent improvements. And that's for a continuing period of time. So again, that's kind of one that we're targeting. If we look at their 5-year forecast, this 5-year forecast puzzles me. In that, if we look at line 13.020, those are for new property taxes. So what they're putting on is an additional levy. So this is new. They have it factored in. So they've factored in 21, 22, 23, and 24. But also, what are we seeing on the very, very bottom line? Deficits. So even with this new levy that they're looking to pass, they still have deficits going on. Deficits, right, in fiscal 22, 23, and 24. So I'm not quite sure. This one does puzzle me. Now, their tax rate right now is about 106. With this levy, it's going to go over 110. We know that that's pretty high for Cuyahoga County. Again, we're at 35.7. But yeah, this does puzzle me, that they're putting a new levy on now, but they still have a deficit not too far out in the future. So I almost wonder if they're going to be coming up soon to another levy, or there's another plan. But again, this puzzles me, and But again, I like to study all school districts just to see. Now, for us, again, the whole point is just to give us more guidance on what other schools are doing and kind of helping us target potentially putting a levy on. I would fall back to Lakewood, kind of use them as, a similar district to us. They put a levy on in calendar year 2020, which we're in right now. They have a deficit in that 5th year of the forecast, and they did the combined levy. It's kind of the same way that we're looking at it. We have the deficit in the 5th year of our forecast. We do know that we have a need with 80-year-old buildings for, some type of funding to improve that. There's no immediate need, which we've talked about, but there's a need, in the future because these buildings are 80 years old. So we're going to have to, like Mr. Evans was saying, the piping. If we were to peek our heads up here and look at the piping, we might see some, I don't know, but it could be falling apart. So we know that that's happening. We know that there's the potential there to need to fund it. We did have, a couple law firms come in tonight and give us guidance on just what is out there for the potential for funding permanent improvements, as well as, we know we're going to need operating to some extent. So it's giving us kind of an overview of just what's out there, what's on the horizon, and what's our need for it, just looking at the 5-year forecast. So I want nothing to catch us off guard. I don't want to be like, I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but I want to be like Olmstead Falls, and your back's up against the wall and you have to really pass something, you're cutting. The whole goal is not to be any type of detrimental, unfavorable aspect to the students or staff or anybody in the community here for the district. Plan accordingly, be proactive, not reactive. So it's looking at our 5-year forecast, just studying what others are doing, studying our own entity, and just kind of being mindful of it. So that wraps this portion of the presentation. The other presentation I want to do is discussion of Phase 2 and Phase 3. I do have these printed out for everyone here, but I have highlighted in the right for the corresponding board meeting that we, for number 16, is the work session, so that's today, for levy discussion with Enos Britton as well as GPD. So the thought was, and we looked at our 5-year forecast, what was the purpose of having these law firms come in and talk to us about levies? Well, we looked at our 5-year forecast. We know that other schools are putting on for certain reasons. Some are, the backs are up against the wall. Lakewood, they have time, we have time, so we're not in any type of immediate need for levy funds, but the potential is out there for the operating side of it. We do know from our assessment with GPD group that we hired that the buildings, are in need of, improvements over the course of, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, even longer. So how, do we, for our goal is to, do we want to fund that, going forward, so we have something in place, because we have no PI money coming in the district except for the pilot, payment in lieu of taxes. So that was our discussion for item 16 that we had. Below that, 17 is after we hear from both those entities, Enos Britton and GPD, then we start our discussion, of a type, length, and amount of operating bond and or permanent improvement levy, and we could do that for the next 2 to 3 months, talk about that and just get a better sense of what direction we want to go as we move forward. The need for operating funds, the need for PI or bond funds for a facility improvement project that we would have here at the district. For 18, Lindy, this is going to wrap into the Finance Committee. We'll look to schedule a Finance Committee meeting to discuss the type, length, and amount of operating and or bond permanent improvement. And again, we would look for an opinion from the finance group for the board.
So are we looking at next week's meeting being in the pink, like line item 9?
Yes. Yes, and that's the last couple items I was going to talk about. Yes, 9 is scheduling that Finance Committee meeting, and I think we wanted to schedule it for
It's February 18th at 5 p.m., Matt.
to 18 at 5 p.m.
Top of it.
All right, perfect. I'll send out that notice. And then I'm going to pass the ball over to Tom to talk about the scheduling of the meetings and the professional staff development day that we have this Friday.
Got a PD day Friday that I'll go through Jason's PowerPoint with the findings from the architect's firm and talk to the staff about where we're at with that. I've reached out to the 3 villages, got a meeting scheduled with Cuyahoga Heights. I think March 11th is the before their board meeting. I think we have a meeting that night, so I'll be there at 6 talking there. I have not heard back from Valley View or Brooklyn Heights yet, and Valley View senior citizens are going to allow me to come down next month, and I'll present to them. And I'll be reaching out to Brooklyn Heights' Men's and Women's Service Club, as well as Cuyahoga Heights' senior citizens, and Valley View's Men's Service Club. So anybody that'll have me, I'll go down and give them a abbreviated presentation and tell them, and try to get some input and some feedback from community members.
Let me know when you do the one in Valley View with the seniors. I would like to be there.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say, keep us posted so that we could.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping to get, I just thought that they were waiting for me to ask them for dates, so they're not. Kyle got back to me real quick, I just haven't heard back. I'll follow up with the other ones, though. Julie.
President of Men's Service Club.
Okay,
so
good.
That's simple.
Excellent, before they play cards.
I was gonna say, I wanna go to that one, because
Okay.
I'm not allowed to go to the Men's Service Club.
And I just had one more discussion item for tonight. We heard from Enos Britton, which is our main legal counsel here for the district, and they brought up that, for bond counsel, that's maybe not in their wheelhouse, that they would have to farm it out in essence. Well, at my previous school, I worked with attorneys from Squire Patton Boggs that dealt with bond issues, but they also deal with just levy, legal counsel in general. So, we have a contact at Squire Patton Boggs. Maybe the idea is to bring on, that law firm to work as a team, to be a component of our team, to help us with any type of drafting of the language, double checking the numbers for any type of levy that we would have out there. The cost is, it's not material but significant. We're talking under $5,000 for the whole kit and caboodle. And the thought would be that they would assist us with drafting up levy language, double checking and computing figures and numbers that we would look at for any type of levy need, both for permanent improvements, bond issues potentially, or general operating, as well as even the potential for them to come out and speak with the board and the finance committee meeting to bring them along. So potentially we have something on the board agenda for the 26th. So the next meeting for everybody to see.
About that?
Yes.
Okay. I was gonna say that means it probably happen sooner rather than
Yeah.
later.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And we had a positive meeting just to gauge interest on their behalf, and they seem very interested in working as a team with our district too. So that's all I have for tonight.
Okay. Thank you. Agreements and contracts, would that be you, Mr. Evans?
Yeah, I'll take that. Motion to approve the attached 45-day trial service agreement with Hometown Ticketing for an online ticketing system for the sale of tickets for the middle school, high school play to be held on March 6th, 7th at no cost to the district. This is kind of this is a newer company that Matt has sat down with Mr. Kelber, and we're going to kind of do a trial run with them. Kathy Martin's been involved in that at the play to see. Remember the last company kind of went out. Fortunately, we got our money back. We got our money from them. Other districts didn't. But so we're kind of tiptoeing as we enter this realm. So
If I could, I took a quick look at the contract, and it says something, there's a $1 fee for every ticket sold. Will that include, because I remember when we had that other company, even though I didn't have to pay to get in, I had to get a ticket, which means they were earning $1 if that was the agreement.
That's correct.
For a free ticket.
Yes.
So does the same thing go here?
Yes, there is an upcharge for the convenience. So, for example, I don't carry cash. I just don't. When you go to a play or basketball game, if you want to, I know, it's the millennial in me, but if you go to a game, you can still pay in cash at the door, but if you want that extra convenience, in order for them to offer the convenience, they get their cut. This is their money to make their, this is for them. So it's just an extra offering. If people want that convenience with the, we'll have, verbiage, or we'll make it known that there is added costs for that convenience to pay online.
Right, yeah, because football games here, senior citizens are free. Most of the stuff here, senior citizens are free, staff members, board members, and we're all free. That's going to be a lot of tickets.
Right, and that wouldn't stop. So you can still pay with cash, but this is just...
No, they're all free.
I know.
But they're going to charge us $1.
No, because in the past, you're not going to, unless they issue a ticket, no.
Okay, but they issued me a ticket that one week that they ran it, that other company.
Okay, well, they shouldn't have.
They issued me a ticket. They said, we got to give everybody a ticket, and they issued me a ticket.
No, we still have the ability, they can't regulate who we're going to get passes to and who we're not going to get passes to, so
Okay,
that's not.
that was my question.
We never
They're gonna-
enter into an agreement if they were going to
They're
say,
gonna force us to
you
get
can't get
tickets to-
passes to.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
No.
Because that would certainly be a source of income around here. Okay, sorry.
That's all right. Resignations. Motion to approve resignation of Kim Walter as lunchroom monitor effective at the close of the day on January 31st, 2020, and she's going to actually move to another position, so she's resigning from that position. Employment classified, motion to approve employment of Joseph Bladis as substitute head mechanic, not to exceed 20 hours as needed for the transitional and training purposes effective February 13th to the 28th, 2020, per the hourly rate, tradesman 1, step 19, prorated, contingent upon successful completion of BCI, FBI fingerprint background checks. B, employment of head mechanic, motion to approve the employment of Joseph Bladis as the head mechanic on a one-year limited classified staff contract for 2019-20 school year effective March 2nd, 2020, per the adopted salary schedule, tradesman 1, step 19, $61,529 prorated, contingent upon BCI, FBI fingerprint checks. C, employment of a monitor bus attendant. Motion to approve employment of Kim Walter as a monitor bus attendant for a one-year limited classified staff contract for 19-20 school year effective February 3, 2020, per the adopted salary schedule, 4.5 hours per day, step 2, $12.87 per hour, contingent upon successful completion of BCI, FBI fingerprint checks. And D, improvement of salary classification for substitute secretary. Motion to amend the motion previously approved on January 22nd to approve the employment of Aaron Zink as a substitute secretary for approximately February 18th to March 30th, 2020, per the adopted schedule. Salary, secretary A, step 5, $17.22 per hour. I'd ask that those be approved on a consent agenda.
So moved, or I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Second? I guess I'll second it then.
And as I said, Kip's moving from a cafeteria monitor to a Band 8 for us, so he resigned from one to go to the other. Joe Blados says we have all his paperwork in, ready to go. He'll start to transition in, which Jim Zerbolo has been doing yeoman's job of double duty for us lately. And then Aaron was just put on at the wrong salary step, so we're just making that adjustment here. So we approved her at the last meeting, we just approved her at the wrong rate. So,
Okay.
So I was curious about that.
No.
Okay.
It says substitute teacher
Yeah.
rate instead of substitute.
Substitute secretary rate, yeah. So,
Is there any other discussion? Okay.
Mrs. Schukert?
Aye.
Mr. Dobbins?
Aye.
Mrs. Etter?
Aye.
Mr. Strachey?
Aye.
Mr. Neiman?
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0. Superintendent's discussion.
Ed Troy's testimony, I contacted Kevin Miller from Basso today. We played phone tag a little bit. I said that I would gladly come down and testify. What's happening right now, the Ed Choice, the people that are in favor of the Ed Choice vouchers are flooding the legislature. If you saw the schedule, they're probably doing more hearings for this than they have. Again, as Galen told you, they're anxious to get home to start campaigning because of the primaries coming up. So the big criticism was that it was not going to be fully vetted. So if you saw the schedule I sent out, there's hearings every day. So I volunteered Kevin to come down, and I said I'd work with him on whatever he felt appropriate for my testimony. So, and then Mr. Dobbins also contacted me and said he'd be willing to go down as well. So I'll talk to Kevin tomorrow, and I said I'll go down on Monday. I'll go down on the holiday. If they're going to do it over the weekend, I can come down on the weekend. If they're going to have hearings, that's fine with me. Not a problem. Professional development on Friday. You're all welcome to join us. We'll start bright and early at 7:30. Mr. Dobbins is going to kind of kick us off. I'll have a cup of coffee for him. He can welcome the staff here for our PD day. I'm going to talk about the capital improvement plan with the staff, OTES 2.0, and Matt Young will be back to talk a little bit about that through his Summit County Educational Service Center. Staff recognition, I gave you a little handout on employee recognition program. Please take a look at that. Lindy, I put that together. Lindy and I have been kind of texting back and forth about that, some employee recognition. That's kind of what I came up with. I made some adjustments on it based on Lindy and my conversation, but please give me some feedback on this. I'm kind of really like to kick it off at the next meeting with our Students of the Month. Lindy and I were kicking around names on that too, so please feel free to give me some feedback on that. Sophomore visitation at CVC was today. We had, I think, 15 or 16 sophomores down there, a good group of kids. Mr. Schukert's son thinks I'm stalking him because every time he turns around, I'm standing there, but...
He's thinking, oh, shoot, did he remember?
Yeah, he was there. He was paying attention. Good day for our kids down there. Thank you to Dave Wallace. Dave really did 98% of the work on the safety plan upgrade, switching over to the new system, going out and getting signatures from everybody, the EMS coordinator, and he got that off to the state a couple days early for its renewal. As I said before, the state, in their infinite wisdom, changed the format of it, so we just couldn't make changes to our old safety plan to resubmit it. We literally had to go back through and redo the whole safety plan all over again and enter it into the computer. Dave did all that work, so I truly appreciate that. March 11th at 6 o'clock, the capital improvement meeting at Cuyahoga Heights Village Hall. Congratulations to our swimmers and our lady swimmers and our lady bowlers. Excellent swimming contingent. Our swim program is strong. Mr. Ellis's daughter will be there this week down at Cleveland State, trying to earn their trip to the state tournament. And lady bowlers, they're 3 years old, our lady bowlers team, and they qualified for the districts. So nice job by them. Also, the rest of our winter sports teams are starting tournament play starts. I know the basketball and boys basketball, girls basketball both have their brackets drawn and kind of know where they're going to start with. And wrestling is a couple weeks away. Actually, the girls state wrestling tournament is in 2 weeks. I'll be down there working at that. So thank you to everyone that assisted with the conference wrestling tournament, the regional duels that took place over the weekend. I know Mr. Dobbins was an observer. We were the mecca of wrestling here 2 weekends in a row, and lots of fun. 19 teams for the conference, and then 13 teams for the regional duels, and a couple busy days. But thanks to all those volunteers that came out and helped.
I might add that you're probably one of the few superintendents that runs wrestling meets on the weekends.
Yeah, the superintendent from Richmond Heights has given me a little bit of grief because we were kind of pushing them out the door Friday night to set mats up, and she goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm setting mats up." She goes, "No, really, what are you doing?" I go, "No, really, I'm setting mats up. I need you to get out of the way. We're putting mats on the floor."
He's the only one who knows. Your wrestling tournament.
And just a reminder, I'll forward it out this Friday. Matt and I are probably due for evaluations. I know that maybe you've been off the radar, so I'll send you the format for that, so you can start thinking about that. Unless there's another format you want, I'll send the format that you've used the last couple of years out to you, and you can, as a group, you can start talking about that. So didn't want to get too far close to the end of the year because things are going to get real busy. I know we've been busy with the capital improvement stuff, but I don't want that to come off the radar as well. So those are announcements from me.
Very good, thank you. Next is board business resolutions. Approve request to attend professional conferences.
And you see the one you have in front of you is the Chagrin Valley Mental Health Summit, and I gave you the handout on that. That's free. That's sponsored by our league. So feel free to click online and register for that at no cost. Thanks, David. Some of our staff are already involved in that, but that looks to be a really well planned out day. This is the same summit that they planned last year for a Saturday. Didn't have enough attendance to really run it, so I'm really hoping to get this up and running. A lot of good topics there. They've really put together a nice agenda, so if any board members can attend that, I strongly encourage that. Some of our Mr. Coleman will be there. I know Mrs. Satterley's already signed up, the school psychologist. Unfortunately, Ms. Meffy, our social workers, is on that state committee, and they meet that same day. So she'll be in Columbus. She's kind of sorry that she got two things at one time there. So that's on there for your approval. And we can add, if we approve that as a group, then we can just add names as there's no cost to that. As far as registration fees, it would just be your attendance there. So.
Yeah, I plan to attend that, so I'm glad we got it on the agenda.
And I've been considering it, so.
Okay, yeah, it's very easy online if you want to register.
I'd be doing it as a counselor, and so I won't be asking for compensation, so I don't need permission.
Is Lakewood participating, or you're going to
No, they're not. I learned from Mr. Evans, that is not our
conference.
Oh.
But I'd like to go for.
Yeah, she could still
By all
take it.
means, by all means. Okay, great. Very good. So then we're moving to board policy and bylaws, and that's probably Mr. Evans' wheelhouse.
Yep, and starting with the first one, homeless students, and these are a result of the working with Neola on the audit. Joe Sigworth came in, and we had several that needed to be revised, and this is one of the first revisions, the homeless student, and essentially, with the exception of any of the revisions are being revised due to changes in the Ohio Revised Code in the law. So we're not arbitrarily making changes to these. Quite essentially, they are the same as they are written now, with the exception of whatever legal changes are in there. We haven't deviated from what we currently have in policy. So I'll preface that as we begin to go through these, and we've got one new one in there. So this is the homeless students that we have had, and that's updated. The second policy is children and youth in foster care, which again is a revised policy for us. The third policy is technology. Dave worked on this with us, and again, this is a revision and an upgrade. What we did add to that was in conjunction with the Director of Information Technology. So we've added Dave as a twofold, myself and Dave, on those technology checks with that. The technology privacy, again, thanks to Dave on that. Again, that's a revision, again, due to some legal things, and we've added Dave to that, as well as the Director of Information Technology. Web accessibility, content, apps, and services. Again, same thing, that's a revision. And again, we added progress book to that because that's the current system that we're using. The old policy had it outdated, and in our website onto that, and Director of Information Technology. But everything else reads as the way it has read currently. Staff technology, acceptable use and safety. And that's, again, a revision, and quite honestly, this is probably, and Dave's been at it, quite honestly, with the way the law is changing as far as I think you're probably going to see that in front of you every year from now until whenever. It's just changing so fast. Acceptable use. District issued student email accounts, again, just updated and revised on that part of it. The principal in there is one of the checks on that one. Use of social media.
Tom, on that one,
This is new.
Well, I was going to say, you checked the volunteers, like district approved volunteers. Are they even told about like social media? You know what I mean? Because it's such a hot topic.
That's on us. And one of the things that we've talked with too is making sure that volunteers, depending on where they're volunteering at, we include them in some of the public school works that we're doing, to the extent that it would apply to what position they would fill. Our teachers right now are a pretty extensive public school works list. What Dr. Close, where we had about maybe 10 to 13 different public
training on an annual basis.
Yeah. But then just to those that, depending on their position as a volunteer, what they would need to go, what specific type training we would require for them to have.
And a lot of these apply to when they're on social media using our system.
Our system.
So if they're logging into our server to access these systems, that's...
Right, on their own device.
Right.
Which we cannot filter.
Right, we can't filter, but if they're doing something that goes against the policy on their own device, but using like the Wi-Fi of the school,
They won't be able to use the Wi-Fi without logging in. They have to actually, to use our Wi-Fi, they actually have to enter either as a guest or as a staff member. Is that correct, Dave?
Not each time.
No.
You don't
Like
have to log in.
mine was popping up like, because your Wi-Fi,
Once you're in there, once it'll automatically pick it up. But again, you will have had it gone through the,
You have to connect.
right.
There's a disclaimer on the guest Wi-Fi stating that you're going to follow our rules and our procedures if you're going to use our school network.
but doesn't it only show up like the first time you do it, then
Yes.
after that, it goes to that?
Correct.
I'm just, again,
Yeah.
No, right.
That's me.
I think that these are things, especially being in, oh gosh, what's our attorney's name? He's gonna kill me.
John?
Being in John's session at OSBA, the Capitol Conference, you know, there were a lot of people that lost jobs because of things on social media, and the more we can get in front of that, I think,
And we address it opening day. It's always part of that opening day discussion.
but volunteers aren't there. I guess.
Well,
I'm just saying that
actually they are.
volunteers-
The volunteers are invited to the opening day,
Okay.
yeah. We try and have every staff member in the district at opening day.
I think the reason policy, part of it is just to bring forth, listen, if you're going to use social media in terms of a school-related function event, you're an advisor, there's a certain decorum
Right.
and procedure, and there's an expectation of how you behave on that social media.
But John said even like teachers had gotten in trouble for posting a picture with like an alcoholic drink
Oh, sure.
at a function. Like one lost her job because she was double fisted. Like, I'm just saying, volunteers might not have the background that the educators, the staff members that are hearing it over and over.
And again, they don't hear it over and over. They essentially hear it once. And I will tell you that, you know, when I was principal, I got a call from a parent that somebody's Facebook account and had to have a discussion with a staff member about what they had on their Facebook account. So
Just something to know.
people are looking at everything, so
Yeah.
they are. It's just,
Yeah.
that's just the,
Our society.
you know, if you don't want somebody to see it, don't post it. I guess that's the moral of the story, because they see it, people see everything, so.
Except all the kids asking if we're having a snow day.
Yeah,
They're
they're
I don't want to see that.
all trolling my Twitter account right now, I guarantee you, waiting for that to come across.
Snow day calculator,
Yeah.
right, Mr. Evans?
Yep.
99%.
99%.
Seen the plow go by
Chance
4
of snow
times.
or
Yeah.
chance of closure.
I can see it snowing right now.
I tell them, I said, Cuyahoga Heights has 2 streets and 3 plows, and we're not having a snow day.
Yeah, there you go.
Emergency situations at schools, this is a revision. And again, it's consistent with what we've had before. They talk about smoke detectors, sprinkler systems, fire drills. Rapid dismissals must continue to be conducted 9 times a school year, which we do. Such drills, however, may be combined with 3 required school safety drills, and we adhere to all of our safety drills get logged into the online system, and we get regular reports back on that. As a matter of fact, Dave just asked me, we did a lockdown drill yesterday. Want to know if we wanted to count that, because actually we're trying to plan a reunification drill of 1 grade level this spring. So we're going to do the evacuation drill and bring 11 grades back, but let one of the grades know. I was thinking middle school because they can't get in cars and leave on us. But and notify the parents, get letters out, talk to them, here's what it looks like, and then have them come down to Valley View and go through the process of picking their students up. We do that obviously near the end of the day, but just to see how that whole accounting system works for us on that level as a first step to doing a reunification. So we saw some of it kick into place last Friday with the missing child from Valley View. I commend Valley View Safety Forces. They were communicating with us right from the start. Dave called me, Nairo, and wants to do a tabletop with the other 2 villages. They want to talk through some things that came up. I truly appreciate working with them because they're really professionals, and they really want to evaluate things afterwards and say, what could we have done better with that? So just first class. All of our police and fire chiefs do a great job. So district-sponsored organizations, again, that's a revision. A lot of discussion around that because we have some the difference, just talking about between district-sponsored organizations and organizations that we allow to take place with individual staff as moderators to them. So FCA, our LGBT are two groups that we have staff members that volunteer to moderate those groups, and they meet at lunchtime, and our staff members do a great job with that. But that's different from a district-sponsored organization where a teacher would get a supplemental contract and it would be officially sponsored by the school district. So as you saw, as we went through with the Drug-Free Clubs of America, the board would formally adopt that as something we would do. So, and that's a revision there. So.
Okay, very good, thank you. May I have a motion to approve the board's business consent agenda? Well, that would have been the attendance at the professional conferences primarily.
We do have to vote on,
We didn't do that
It's
one.
first reading.
I'm sorry?
you're right, never mind, sorry.
Yeah, this is first reading of them.
Yeah, so I think the only thing, the board business would include that attending professional
Professional
conferences.
conference.
Yeah, so can I have a motion to approve that, well, actually, the entire consent agenda, which is that.
So moved.
Mr. Souchaki moves.
I'll second.
Mr. Naaman seconds. Very good. Any discussion? I think we've had the discussion, right?
I think so.
I think so. Okay, so let's move on to a roll call then, or vote.
Mr. Souchaki?
Aye.
Mr. Naaman?
Aye.
Mrs. Utter?
Aye.
Mrs. Schukert?
Aye.
Mr. Dobbins?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Next is board discussion committee reports and comments. Does anyone like to start this conversation? Do you have anything, Mrs.
Just really
Schuker?
quick, because we're
Yeah, right, so
getting late.
Yeah.
Finance Committee meeting, February 18th at 5 PM.
Very good.
That's all I got.
Mr. Souchaki?
Mine is about as quick. Technology committee meeting before the next board meeting. We're going to try. Can you make it at 6? Because if not, we'll just start at 6:15 or something.
Yeah, I'll make it.
Okay, 6 o'clock, right before the next board meeting, technology committee, and I imagine we'll meet upstairs, right?
Very good.
And that's all I have.
Great. Mrs. Etter?
Just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Mucho tonight about his discussion about the 5-year forecasts and the other school districts and their situations and the parallels that he made. And I thought that was really insightful. And look forward, I'm glad that our teachers and our staff are going to have professional development this week. I think that's great. And then the health summit, this one is good and it's close and it's in Beechwood, but OSBA was having their also summit on the February 25th. Everyone was looking for another mental health summit to attend.
Very
And
good.
that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Naaman?
Two quick things. I wanted to, I attended the Power of the Pen at University Schools. That was, let's see, a week and a half ago. So it's not this past Saturday before. Our students did really well. Congratulations to all the 7th and 8th graders that participated. And also thanks to Ms. Nolan, too, that actually that guided those students through that process and also for the competition, too, as well. And then secondly, just want to wish good luck to, especially to our girls swim team this weekend and the bowlers this weekend, as they move on in their state competitions. And also good luck to all the basketball and wrestlers, too, as their winter sports programs finish up. So that's it.
Very good. Thank you. The only thing I was going to mention, I'm going to be attending I plan to attend the Mental Health Summit next week, and then the kickoff with Mr. Evans of the Staff's Professional Development Day this Friday. Moving on to future agenda items, is there anything that the board would like to consider or discuss in future meetings?
I sent out the agenda review, and I only put times in through, I think maybe the beginning of April, and I think Gary got in and checked his time, so I try to do it based on your availability, Joe. I know you can't be here. So
I put it in. Actually,
okay,
all the time.
and so Gary's, I moved up a little bit earlier because he can be here a little bit earlier. Lindy, I think I put you down for 4:30.
I don't even think I read the email.
No, it's you don't have to, it just, if the time is, if you want to be earlier or later, go ahead in there and change it. I just arbitrarily
My
put the.
schedule's crazy because I'm coaching, I'm tutoring, and I'm parenting.
Okay.
So it's different than it was in the fall. So
Okay.
I will be wherever I need to be.
Feel free to go in and change the time on that, though. That's strictly,
Make it
I'm trying
work,
to meet the needs of everybody on the board, and that's
It's
fine.
also between yourself and Mr. Dobbins too as well, and Mr. Dobbins, so like, I mean, I can make it earlier in the morning too, so if you want to do it at
Whatever works for you, gentlemen.
7:30, we could do it then too.
Quite honestly, I like doing it in the afternoon, because then that gives us time to talk about,
Okay.
if we need to, I don't want to have to cut it short if there's agendas, things that we want to talk about,
Yep,
so
sounds good.
I'd rather not rush it.
The only thing I would offer or ask Mr. Evans and Mr. Muccio is to let the board know if you anticipate needing to call a special meeting, because we have so much information that's coming at us and that we're going to be needing to assess. So feel free to give us a heads up if you see a need for a future special meeting. Other than that, I don't have anything else. Okay. Agenda information. It should be noted that the Board of Education members received their agendas several days prior to the actual meeting, thus they have had considerable opportunity to study it, ask questions, etc. Upcoming regular meetings, February 26th, 2020, March 11th, April 8th, April 22nd, May 13th, May 27th, June 10th, and June 24th, 2020, regular meetings, 7 p.m. Wednesdays. And now, I'd like to make a motion for the board to adjourn to executive session pursuant to ORC Section
G4.
121.22G4, did you say?
Yes.
Thank you. Don't need to read, preparing for, conducting, reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment. Motion? Mrs. Schukert motioned, Mr. Naaman second, all in favor? Or we have to do a roll call?
Yeah.
Okay, roll call, please, Mr.
Mrs.
Muccio.
Schukert.
Aye.
Mr. Naaman.
Aye.
Mrs. Etter.
Aye.
Mr. Sucheki.
Aye.
Mr. Dobbins.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. We are in executive session. It is 9:25, and we will not...
No business to follow.
Thank you. No business to follow. Thank you.